Hello friends, my name is Michelle Fondin and I'm the author of Help, I Think My Loved One is an Alcoholic, a survival guide for lovers, family, and friends. And welcome back. Today we're going to talk about a really sensitive topic, and that topic is to intervention or not to intervention. That is the question. Obviously, we're talking about an intervention with your alcoholic loved one. I'm going to give you my personal research and my personal story on this topic, as it's extremely heartfelt. It's really emotional for me, and I will give you the inside scoop on what happened with me. Now, this doesn't mean that it's exactly what's going to happen with you, but you really need to make your own decision as to whether or not you're going to go about doing an intervention for your alcoholic loved one. I'm going to first read to you a quote from one of the persons in recovery whom I interviewed for the book, and his name is Tim. This was on what message would you give to those who love an alcoholic? And this is what Tim said. Tim said, I think the loud and clear message is, I'm dying here, and they could see that, but I couldn't tell them. Emotionally, I had no level of saying, it's killing me and I need help. I wouldn't say it. I would say I needed help with bills and money, but what I really needed was to be removed from my life because I was dying. So that is what Tim had to say. And that leads me to this book that I found called Love First, A Family's Guide to an Intervention, or to Intervention, by Jeff Jay and Debra Jay. I will explain to you what led me to this particular book, which I actually fell in love with. I loved this book because it took a very loving approach to doing an intervention with your alcoholic loved one. So a little bit about my history. In July 2013, I met the man who I absolutely love and adore, who is an alcoholic, an addict. I didn't know it at the time. I really didn't know what alcoholism was. I was super confused about the behavior because I'd never really seen alcoholic behavior. Now, that being said, I had seen dysfunctional behavior before, as I grew up in a completely dysfunctional household. It's just that there was no overt alcohol addiction or drug addiction, but a lot of the symptoms and a lot of the personality traits mimicked that of an addict. Oftentimes we're attracted to, and you'll see this in my relationship series on the other playlist on relationships in studying imago therapy. When we choose a loved one, we choose a significant other partner, oftentimes that partner mimics traits, positive and negative traits, of your caregivers. And I was immediately attracted to him. We fell in love at first sight. Literally, it was totally nuts and crazy. And we were super close. We got really embroiled in this spiritual connection more than anything else. Definitely there was chemistry, there was a physical connection, but we both felt that there was this innate spiritual connection, this soulmate connection, like we had known each other for years. We were immediately just completely enthralled with one another and embroiled in each other's lives. Over time, a short period of time, but over time, I began to notice the signs and symptoms of alcoholism, which I wasn't really sure it was alcoholism. I just knew he drank too much. I knew that he drank during the week, which I thought was really bizarre. I noticed that he was drinking a lot more than he initially said he was going to drink. So, for example, one night he brought over a bottle of wine, and I was like, okay, it's the middle of the week. Plus, I didn't really drink. At that time, and even before that, I could go years without having a drink, or drink on a anniversary or a birthday or New Year's, but nothing at all, not even social drinking really for that matter. But when we began to date, I began having a drink with him because I was like, okay, I'm trying to get to know this person, but literally I'm a sipper. So it's funny, one of the other people I interviewed for the book, she mentioned to me that alcoholics call that alcohol abuse when you don't really drink alcohol or you take little sips of wine or something. She's like, that's called alcohol abuse. She said that in jest is a kind of a joke. What happened was, over time, I was seeing the signs and symptoms of alcoholism, and I called him on it after a few months, and he promised me, okay, after my birthday, which is in November, after my birthday, I promise you I'll go 1 month not drinking to show you that I can actually stop drinking. And I was like, okay, that sounds reasonable. Again, not knowing what alcoholism is and not really understanding that's what it was, I just took him for his word. At that time, between that month period, he was drinking the whole time, and I had no idea. I had no clue whatsoever. And then slowly he was moving in with me. Now, in the beginning of a relationship, you're so excited to see each other, and You tend to spend a lot of time together. You leave clothes over each other's houses. And since I had kids living with me, it just seemed more natural that he would move his stuff into my place, and then he would be staying more often with me than I with him since I had the kids at home. That's what happened. And during that month, he was drinking, and I had no idea he was drinking because he was concealing it super well. But I would notice these personality changes, and I just wasn't sure what was going on. Finally, toward the end of December, something happened, and I found out that he had been drinking the whole time because I found a bunch of empty bottles of alcohol in the trunk of his car. It was at that time that I confronted him again, and he apologized and said he was really sorry and didn't give me much of an explanation, like to admit that he was an alcoholic. It was just like really a bizarre explanation. So I prayed a lot about it. I prayed about it through the month of January. His mom had called me at some point to check on his son because he had his son on the weekends, and since he was staying with me, then his son was also staying with me. And I was saying something about some behavioral changes, and she just mentioned to me, she said, well, did he say that after he had had a couple of drinks? And I was like, I'm like, okay, that's really weird. And so then we got to talking, and then I realized that it really was a problem much bigger than even he had exposed to me. And I also realized that it was in his family. All the clues started coming together about what alcoholism was and the fact that he was suffering from it. I began to do tons of research. One of the things that came to me was this book, Love First, A Family's Guide to Intervention. I confronted his mom with this book and I said, hey, this might be worth trying. And I said, has anyone ever tried to get him to get help or to try to stop drinking? And she said, well, not really. He won't really admit that he has a problem. And, I guess one Christmas she had asked him to attend an AA meeting, but if people don't want to attend or if they're just doing it to please somebody else, then obviously it's not going to work. It's just going to backfire. Maybe they might just do it just to please the other person and then never go back again. Through reading this book, it really came to me that something needed to be done, that if he was going to continue down this slippery slope, that he was going to kill himself, and which is true because alcoholism is a chronic, progressive, and fatal disease. And that's true for every single alcoholic and drug addict. Alcoholism takes a little bit longer to kill than certain street drugs. However, it's still a killer no matter what. It's going to take away decades of your life. As mentioned in the book, alcoholics have to hit a rock bottom. Alcoholics who are able to function with a job or be able to pay their bills and take care of some responsibilities, they have a very low bottom, meaning that they can bounce along the bottom for several years without actually hitting rock bottom, meaning that they're basically existing, they're not really flourishing, they're not growing, they're destructive to themselves, they're destructive to other people, but they can spend years and years and years kind of bouncing along the bottom, sometimes hitting rock bottom and sometimes bouncing back up. What an intervention does is it helps to raise the bottom a little bit higher so that they can get the help that they need. And this is usually done in a really loving fashion with family members and friends. The more people that you have who support this, the better it will be for the person who is the alcoholic. So basically, the basic premise is you pick a place, date, time. You have a certain number of people who have written letters about the alcoholic, and it's usually super loving. So it's about the great qualities of this person, their gifts, their talents, whatever you can think of. And even if they've been destructive for a really long time, it might be hard to think of their gifts and talents and positive traits. But if you try really hard, everybody has gifts, talents, and positive traits. Looking at something that they did for you that was super nice, or looking at how they treat you when they're sober. So just looking at their positive traits, but then also infusing some of the destruction of the alcoholism by giving concrete examples. So just saying, when we were at that wedding in 2012, this happened and you were out of control and you were making people feel uncomfortable and you were making yourself look foolish and then you passed out. Like just telling them something concrete that can show them that the behavior is really destructive. But it's all done in a very loving manner in an effort to help them get to the help that they need. And usually at the end of the intervention, you're presenting them with some options. You're saying, we called this rehab place, we called this detox place, and they take your insurance, they have a bed for you if you want to come with us now. And what you're looking to do in the intervention is to open up their heart space enough to let in the love and to not have them block that out. Because alcoholics are really, really good at putting walls up around their heart and not letting anybody in. And that's part and parcel of the entire disease. But through the intervention, through this really emotional sharing, it's in hopes that the person themselves, not the alcoholic, but the person themselves behind the disease of alcoholism can open up enough to be ready and open to receiving help. And what Jeff Jay and Debra Jay said in the book is that you usually have a pretty small window because they're so used to putting up barriers that the window is extremely small. And so during the course of the intervention, you're working on opening that heart space enough to be able to let them be open to receiving help before that space closes again. What happened with me and my alcoholic loved one, I had set the spark and I had set the flame in order to have this happen. It was with me and a few family members that we created this. We wrote letters. An interventionist was hired, which wasn't my idea. It was one of his family members' ideas. We set a date. There is a little bit of deception to get the person there. And the only reason for that, it's not because you want to deceive the person, it's that you want to deceive the alcoholic or the alcoholism. Because if you say to the alcoholic, we're going to have an intervention, of course they're not going to show up, right? You have to have a little bit of deception just to get them to the place. Then you sit down with the alcoholic and each person reads his or her letter. It's really super emotional. A lot of people cry and they just have these emotional awakenings. And what you're striving for is to get that alcoholic to cry too and to just really let go emotionally and not have those barriers up that are so high. It was about 9 months into our relationship when this intervention took place. Now, I was taking great risk here. I felt that I needed to do it for him because I loved him so much, I cared for him so much that I was willing to sacrifice myself in order to try to help him. And I really felt that with the help of his family and friends. And in fact, no friends actually showed up for it. As it turns out, most of the friends that he had were also alcoholics, and some of them were really far away that he had made in other states. It was really unfortunate, but nobody was willing to help who was outside of his family. And they were just really closed to the idea. And it was super unfortunate. But we had at least 5 or 6 family members, I can't remember, it was either 5 or 6 family members, plus the interventionist, and it was really super emotional. So like I said, I was the person, as I mentioned, who was like the most disposable at the time because we had only been together for 9 months, but it was a really intense relationship where I felt that there was a lot of love there, a lot of connection, a lot of love. He did sit and listen for about 2 hours. He never let his barriers down. He was very stoic, very cold, very callous. He would nod his head, and everybody was sobbing. Everybody was just so incredibly emotional. And he was a rock, totally a rock. When it was over and the interventionist had said to him, well, we've called this place and they have a bed for you. Would you be willing to come with me? And we can check you into this facility and get you the help that you need. And he basically said no. And he got up and he looked at me and he said, are you coming with me? And I said, well, no, we're not actually done here. And he left and he took all of his stuff from my house and just left. It was really crushing to me because I felt that it was successful, even though it didn't give us the results that we had desired. I felt that all of the things that were said, they absolutely needed to be said. These were things that were bottled up in his family for years and that no one had overtly discussed with him. His brother passed away from the same disease at an early age, and his father passed away from the same disease at an early age. And frankly, he is in his 40s and he's still alive. This was a little over 3 years ago when this happened. Now, we did make amends with our own relationship. At that point, he began to get more and more open about admitting his problem with alcohol. At that point, he became more open about discussing it and about discussing options. Now, as I've mentioned in previous videos, he has been in the beginning stages of recovery a couple of times, and he has not yet embraced recovery fully. Now, you might think like, oh, that's totally nuts and totally crazy. Like, why would you do an intervention knowing that the person might get angry or that he might break up with you or that this might go wrong or the family member might never talk to you again. And I really believe that in retrospect, I don't regret that. I don't regret getting together with his family to create this intervention. I think an intervention is one of the most loving things you can do as long as it's done lovingly. The intervention's not there to assess blame. It's not there to point fingers. It's not there to laundry list all of the things that that person has done wrong. It's really in an effort to get that person out of the addiction and into getting help that they need to save their life. It's a life-saving technique. It's to help raise the bottom if they've been bouncing along rock bottom for like years and years and years, which in this case, my alcoholic loved one certainly has been bouncing along the bottom for many years. So that is the intervention. And you really need to make a decision in your heart as to what you want to do with it. I would advise you, and the book advises you, not to do this alone and not to do it with just one other person. Alcoholics and addicts are kind of like velociraptors. If you've ever seen Jurassic Park, they're kind of like velociraptors. They will pick you apart if you are one or two people. You have to have at least 3 to 4 people in a room to disarm that person in order to just let them start to let their defenses down. Because remember, the alcoholic is so used to picking apart people. That's what they do to get their own way. That's what they do to persist in the addiction. So I would highly recommend this book, A Family's Guide to an Intervention, Love First. This one, I would really highly recommend it. Even if you're on the fence about doing a family intervention, I would say just read the book first and then kind of get your opinion on it and just make the decision as to whether or not that you'll do it. Like I said, 3 years later, he's still super angry about the intervention, but I believe that his anger is more about being embarrassed because most alcoholics believe that nobody else sees their alcoholism but them. They really believe this, believe it or not. Even if they've passed out in public places, even if they stumbled and fell in front of other people, even if they've been vomiting in front of other people, they still have this construed vision in their mind that nobody knows. Nobody knows. I've kept it secret this whole time. Nobody knows. Even their children, they think their children do not know. And I think it's more about that. It's more about the embarrassment of nobody knows. You have an intervention, then everybody knows. Oh my God, I'm so embarrassed. Everybody knows this big secret that I've been keeping all along, when in fact you know as well as I know that it's never a secret. That if you know a person who's an alcoholic, they are the last one to know. Everybody else has known for years and years and years and years. That is an intervention. Again, really take this to heart and do a lot of research and do a lot of soul searching and see if you have a team to put together if that's your intention to try to help your alcoholic loved one get help. Thanks so much for joining me. Please subscribe to my channel, share this video with friends, family, and your dog, and I will see you in the next video.